This is Beyond a Reasonable Doubt with your hosts, Mark Garrigus and Gary Smith.
Okay, to all those hater hoes out there who always complain, Gary, that we never do a midweek, here we are.
God, the one that pissed me off, pissed me off most, wouldn't be another week of Reasonable Doubt if they didn't tease an episode they'll never do. Shut up. The man's very busy, you understand. It's
let's send him some merch anyway for being a snark, a very snarky human. So send him a sweatshirt or a t-shirt. So I was just joking before we got on that Alan Dershowitz, who I was just doing a podcast with Megyn Kelly and Alan, and Megyn was complaining about there no daylight between Alan's thinking and my thinking, and I said to Gary that he was my generational spirit animal, and Gary's comeback was, and I think this is more directed at me than him, but I'll try to spin it, that you guys aren't that different in age. And I said, Gary, I think when I was 39, he was about to turn 60 or just turned 60. So,
well, yeah, Mark went ahead and blew my mind. I had Alan Dershowitz's age in my brain off by about 12 to 15 years. I thought he would, he is still, very quick and seems very spry was the word I used. But I was surprised to learn that. So my apologies, Mark. Certainly.
Well, I did a show last night and Geraldo was on. Do you know that Geraldo is 80?
I did not know that. And I would have also put him closer to 70 than to 80 for sure in my brain. But I mean, now that I think about it, he's been omnipresent in my life for, the 35 years I've been aware of the news. So I guess it sort of makes sense that he would be up there.
Right. So, it was, as anybody who's watching this knows, Trump was convicted across the board. One day, almost to the hour earlier than I expected the jury to come back, basically 4:30 on a Thursday, as opposed to, they didn't really want to come. They wanted a
3-day weekend. Let's just be honest about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Because you don't have to go back to work. You've already told your boss you're going to be gone the whole week. People have asked, is he going to get jail time? And this is one of the things that I was just discussing with Alan. I suspect that the prosecution will ask for jail time, but that he will not get remanded and it'll be stayed pending appeal. Alan had an interesting thought. He said 2-year suspended sentence, prison sentence, not imposed, which then leads you to, if he loses the election and the other 2 federal cases or Georgia ever gets back on track, then would the 2-year sentence end up being imposed based on a conviction in one of the other cases, even though arguably he's going to get a lot more time in January 6th if convicted, or in Georgia if convicted. It's really quite a conundrum he's facing here. So I think he will. I think it's clear he will be out and free to campaign on November 5th. What's not so clear is whether he can vote. I do not think he'll be able to vote in the election.
I've seen conflicting reporting on that. I've seen some pointing to a reform that Florida did in their law and the fact that he's now a resident of Florida. Some people are saying they think he might, but I've also seen your analysis as well. You were doing a show last night where one of the other pundits on air proposed the idea that he be given a house arrest sentence. That doesn't seem very likely to me, but what are your thoughts on that proposal?
The reason I don't think that will happen, I think that's with the irony of Donald Trump having to be forced to campaign from a house arrest while he's accusing Joe Biden, the current president, of campaigning from his basement, is not lost on me. It's also not lost on me the irony that it's my party that has been talking about letting convicted felons vote, and now that will be something that the Republicans will have to champion because we're an upside down world because the pendulum has swung. One of the other things that I had mentioned was, people can talk about, and I was listening to Megyn talk about she wants retribution. She just thinks that. I said, Megan, this all started, way back when. The last example was the 90s, as I often tell you, Gary, when the Republicans were coming after Bill Clinton in Whitewater. They appointed an so-called independent counsel who was anything but independent. Back then, when it was the Republicans coming after the Democrats, it wasn't George Soros, who is the boogeyman now of the right. It was Richard Allen Scaife, and it was the vast right-wing conspiracy. Now you've got the vast left-wing conspiracy. This is going to end up, I'll make a bold prediction here, it's going to end up with a red state, deep red county prosecutor coming after either Ali Mayorkas or the president or some other administration official. And we're going to have this tit for tat. And that is part of the problem with when you criminalize the political process, as we've done. And it's unfortunate, I think, because at some point this pendulum swing has got to stop, because you cannot just keep going, okay, I'm in power, I'm going to do it. I've got a local prosecutor. The local prosecutor who's subject to election is going to do that, that, or the other thing. It's really, this was predictable back in the 90s. It was predictable back in the 80s. You can go back to Iran-Contra. You can go back throughout the history of American political history. This is just it's almost implanted in our DNA.
Yeah, it's really not the way that the criminal law is supposed to be used. And it's something that I think people should be concerned about, no matter which side you're on, because right now there's one camp that's really happy with this. And I think they're not looking, backwards or forwards enough to see that it could absolutely come for the other side just as easily.
Well, and it will. Next week you've got Hunter's trial in Delaware, and you're going to have people twisting themselves into pretzels to the people who were anti-prosecution are now going to be pro-prosecution. The people who were cheerleaders for the prosecution are now going to be on the other side. That is the problem with not having a coherent method to approach the criminal law. The criminal law should not be ginned up to take on somebody that is your political opponent.
When it came to this trial, there was, I think, a lot of it shocked me how many people that I would consider to be informed that didn't really know what was going on in this trial. I think that a lot of that has to do because there was no cameras or recording equipment allowed in the courtroom. So people had to really want it. They had to be watching, news coverage, or they had to be reading diligently articles that may not be readily served to them. What is the calculus on that when it comes to Hunter's case? Is there going to be any sort of broadcast coverage?
No cameras in the courtroom because it's federal court, unlike the state court where you could have cameras in the courtroom, and in many jurisdictions you do. You're not going to have it there. You're going to have the same kind of issue next week. You're going to have people reporting on the case through the prism of which they're looking, and you're not going to be able to get an unvarnished, transparent view of it, and that's a problem. I mean, it's a problem on a number of levels. I dissect it there, but it's a problem when you've got the same people who are complaining about Alvin Bragg and complaining about the judge in New York are going to be now having to, like I say, twist themselves in intellectual and ideological pretzels in order to flip the switch, so to speak, because they're driven by the ideology or the political calculus and not by what the principle or the prosecutorial principle should be. Everybody who criticizes, myself included, the case of New York State Court should be critical of this idea that Hunter's going to be put on trial next week in Delaware.
Putting on your defense attorney cap, what do you think the impact is for the sentencing and the fact that it falls just days before the RNC?
It's very interesting to me. I know that there are specific time limits that can be changed. I think that it's going to, if Trump if Trump hews to what he normally does, he's going to use that to springboard right into the coronation at the RNC and into the election. I mean, he's going to use that as he does before, to skillfully electioneer with it.
I could not agree more. Now, if you'll put on it your potential judge's cap, if you're Judge Merchan, how does that play into what sentence that you are going to levy? Because it's just impossible for him to not consider that. Whatever he does end up giving Trump, that's going to be used. And if it's more extreme, then potentially Trump can weaponize it more. I mean, is that something that you think that he's going to be thinking about?
Well, like I said, before I had the discussion with Alan, I would have bet on 30, 60, or 90 days stayed, meaning it's not imposed now, stayed pending appeal. And if not by the trial judge, by a quick run up to the Intermediate Court of Appeals in New York and have them stay it. Nobody's going to throw him in jail or put him on house arrest when you're looking at July and you've got August, September, October, basically 90 days before the election. So I don't see that happening one way or another. And by the way, you're just setting yourself up, if that's what you're asking for, to have that boomerang back on you.
It's going to be a wild few weeks here at the end of June and into July as we go through the first debate, sentencing, and then straight into the RNC. I mean, there's going to be no shortage of topics for us to cover. That's for sure.
Well, I'll tell you, June 17th is the first debate on CNN. So that'll, what day of the week is that, Gary? And now somebody will criticize you in the comments for having your eyes start around.
No, it's fine. It's a Thursday, but it's actually the 27th that the first debate is on, not the 17th. So June 27th is the Thursday first debate on CNN in their Atlanta studios with no studio audience.
Got it. So, well, we'll have several episodes before then, including on Sunday, because I think we may have a couple of things to talk about on Sunday as well. Thank you for doing the midweek, Gary. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mark. It was fun. And we do have plenty to talk about, including some fun video that's been taking over the internet that I'm certainly excited to watch and get your thoughts on as an attorney. So, Mark, thank you very much.
The video that I think you're referring to, I've had it happen to me, but not on video. So it'll be interesting to talk about.
Well, be sure to watch this episode if you aren't already, and this Sunday's episode on YouTube, youtube.com/Reasonable Doubt Podcast, because this is a very visual gag that we're going to be talking about, and it's very funny. And we'll look forward to your analysis and hopefully some laughs in there as well. Mark, thanks for carving out the time on a Friday. I know you're busy. Have a very nice weekend, and we will see you on Sunday.
You got it. Thanks, Gary. Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to Reasonable Doubt. Subscribe on YouTube at youtube.com/Reasonable Doubt Podcast.